he asked me, he's like, Sue, do you think things happen for you or to you? And at that time, nobody had ever asked me that question. And I thought for a moment, I'm like, well, if I say things happen to me, then I play a victim in my own life. And I didn't want to be a victim in my life. If I say things happen for me, then everything happens for a reason.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today, I'm here with Sue Saller. Sue is a writer, coach, and host of Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. She's also a former guest on this podcast, so definitely go back and check out her first episode, which I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's been a while. I have to go back a couple of years. Sue, thanks for coming on the show again today. I'm super excited to catch up and hear what you've been up to and you know, let the listeners know. So thank you for taking the time out today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm very, very, very excited. And yeah, you were on my podcast. I can't remember when. It was a while ago. So yeah, it was
The
great.
time goes quickly.
I know it does, especially in the podcasting world. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. So you did a great, thank you for such a warm introduction. You covered all the bases there. I'll let you ask the question and then we'll bounce from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just to like catch people up and everything, tell us a bit about your background. Give them, I mean, as much detail as you want, but obviously we'll probably talk a lot about the recent years here. But yeah, give people your background.
Yeah, sure. And I try, it's really hard, Jason, sometimes because I'm on the older side and trying to condense life, like all the experiences and stuff. But
Yeah.
to get it really fast, I am a mom. Well, I was a math teacher. I'm a mom. I homeschooled my kids for 15 some years. I went back into teaching after they got older. That didn't quite work out. Became a financial advisor for a couple of years and did that for 3 years and had an opportunity that fell into my lap last year to become a director of operations for a plumbing and heating company. Went and did that for 6 months, exited that position. And now right now it is literally doing podcasts and asking myself the hard question of what's my next why? Why am I here? So that is it. That's everything fast in a nutshell.
Exactly. Yeah, it's an entire life condensed into 30 seconds. Well, yeah, and before we talked about, I know that you were a math teacher, and I think when you were on previously was you were in that financial advisor position, and so let's talk a little bit about, I guess, kind of these past couple of years and journey into podcasting, the journey into director of operations of a plumbing and HVAC company. I mean, all of that is probably on the surface doesn't necessarily fit with having been a math teacher. Right. But I find often there is a connection of some sort in there. And so, yeah, maybe just walk us through that.
Sure.
In
And you
a little more detail in the last couple of years.
Sure. And you can throw in there a book as well. So I wrote a book called
That's right.
Small Steps, Big Wins to kind of, it doesn't parallel the podcast, but it does reflect the podcast within the book as well. But yeah, to answer your question, to go back a little bit. So the common thread that you mentioned for me is helping people, serving people. And I love to grow things big. So when you put all that together, the teaching position didn't quite work out because even though I loved teaching, enjoyed what I was doing, I didn't fit into the mold of what they were looking for as a teacher. And truly, I think at the end of the day, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So it was really hard for me to stay within the confines of what was being imposed upon me in the districts because I have a way of doing things. I get stuff done. I accomplished the goal, but because I couldn't do it the way they wanted me accomplished, it didn't quite work out. I walked into the financial advising position because I have a background in mathematics. I love finances. I taught Financial Peace University for a long time. It seemed like a natural progression to go into that role. So I took my tests, passed my Series 7, my 66, my life and health. I got all that. I did that role for 3 years, but the challenge was that not that the guy I was working for was a bad guy or anything. It's just that it was all remote work. And what my expectations of the job were not his expectations. I wanted to do more, but he didn't want me to do more, if that makes sense. So I was just I felt very confined, and I did the job. I mean, but I always longed for something else. In between that, about 2.5 years ago, I joined a mastermind group, and that radically transformed my life. That was in October 2022. And when you start getting around entrepreneurs and you start getting around people who don't think like you do and think differently, they thought bigger, they thought better, they just had a different way of thinking than what I had been exposed to, my world just exploded to the possibilities in front of me. Teaching seemed like not for me. There was just a big, I always had this urge within me that there was something more to life. And it's been a process. October 2022 to now is almost 2.5 years, 22, 23, 24. Yeah, almost 2.5 years later. And I'm still in this exploratory phase of where am I going next? So I was working my financial advisor job. I started to lean into this group. I started to explore possibilities. And then June of 2023 happened, and I had a series of, well, I guess May, June of 2023, a series of what I would deem as traumatic events, little t, not big traumatic, but little t, traumatic enough to me to spur change. And so I hit my lowest point ever in that July of 2023. And I'm so grateful to God, to the universe. I'm grateful to God. But if somebody wants to call the universe, that's fine too, to bring my coach into my path. And that's when I met Austin. And then we started coaching. And then my life just exploded from there. And it just took a turn and went, I could find my purpose again. I could find my meaning. He radically transformed my life, my thought processes. I mean, it was already, he didn't do it per se. He brought out what was already in me, if that makes sense.
Oh,
And
it does,
so,
because I also had Austin as a coach, so
that's right. I forgot.
I do understand what that process looks like. So yeah, no, I'm glad that worked well for you. So sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt, but yeah,
No, no, no,
I
no,
do
no.
know
I
that feeling.
forgot. I forgot. That's right. He was, because he introduced you to me. That's how you wound up on my podcast as well.
Yeah,
So that would have been in 2023, fall of 2023.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, yeah. And so, through talking to him, and I went through I think we coached for almost a year
Mhm.
together. And out of that, he encouraged me to write my book. That's where my book came out of. And I realized the book deals with post-traumatic growth. And when I started learning more about post-traumatic growth, I realized that, oh, wait, I'm going through post-traumatic growth. Perhaps my story can help somebody else. And so that's where really the book was born, out of that. Fast forward a little bit to May of last year, and I go to Austin, Texas. There was part of the mastermind that I'm part of. There was a entrepreneurial summit along with our uh, bi-yearly group get together for our mastermind. And I show up, and I said to myself, I'm just going to show up different and expect the unexpected. And sure
Mhm.
enough, the unexpected happened through a series of events. I stood up on stage. I put a big ask in front of 250 people and said, "Hey, I'm an integrator looking for a visionary. I'm willing to try to help you. This is my background." And 15 minutes later, I had an introduction to a guy who owned a plumbing and heating company. And he said, "Hey, I know you're not qualified, but I love your energy. I love your desire to do what you want to do. Do you want to come out to Iowa, move from South Carolina to Iowa, and help me run my plumbing and heating company? And I said, sure, why not? So I figured I need an adventure. Let's go on an adventure. So I did. I completely relocated, uprooted my life. Now, personally, I'm in the process of getting divorced. And so this was the life event change that I was looking for me to get out on my own. And so that's a whole other story there. But this opportunity presented itself, and I said, sure, I'm going to walk through this door. And I don't regret it. Don't look back at all. I'm so glad I did it. It was the scariest thing ever to do, and I'm so glad I did it. So
Yeah, that's I mean, let's pause there
yeah,
and I guess unpack some of it, because I mean, a couple of things that may be really important for people to make note of. One is your sort of willingness and ability to reach out to others, whether that's through the mastermind or bringing Austin on as a coach. I think all of that, you have a strong willingness to help other people, a strong desire to help other people, but I think that almost comes from people that are good at helping other people also recognize when they're needing that help themselves. And so I think just that connection in the mastermind and working with Austin probably led you to that moment on the stage of t- tell us about that. Tell us, like, how did it come up?
yeah.
How did you
I
end
didn't
up
know
on
how.
stage?
Yeah, sure. I didn't know how deep you wanted to go into that. So
Yeah, no,
it's
I'm
a it's
curious
a
for sure.
it's a very interesting story. So it was an entrepreneurial summit, and what that was, I met Cody Sanchez and David Green, David Osborne. They're kind of the big names there. Is part of GoBundance, and so we were invited. I'm part of a mastermind group called Emerge, and we were invited to go to this entrepreneurial summit. Well, part of it was there was a part where there was an ask. So if anybody in the room had something to ask of others in the room. So you have to understand there were 250 people in the room. Almost all of them were entrepreneurs of some capacity that ran a business that they were multimillionaires. They were just it was just a lot of type A personality that those type of go-getting people in the room. But we also recognized that it's give and take, right? So if somebody hasn't asked these, so I stood up on stage, came that part. It's like there were probably 20 or 30 of us standing up on stage and saying what our ask was. And I desperately wanted to change my job. I was working as a financial advisor only part-time. It i i, I was losing my love for life, but I thoroughly believe you are always one conversation away from changing your life. So I had
Yeah.
nothing to lose. I'll stand up on stage and give the ask. Now, let me pause that for a second. The night before, I was in the hotel, like lobby area, with three of my girlfriends. And the one girlfriend asked me, Sue, what do you want out of this? Like, why are you even here? And I explained to her, I'm like, maybe I'd like to change my job and do something, whatever. She stood up right there. She put her hands out. She goes, I manifest right now, Sue, that your life is going to change tomorrow in some capacity. That was the night before. I got up that morning and I go, wow, I feel like my life is going to change today. Something crazy is going to happen. And sure enough, that afternoon, I stood on stage, I gave the ask, and then 15 minutes later, I hear Matt King over the microphone going, Sue Saller, come here. And so I walked across the room, and the rest, I met the operator, and it went from there. I had another conversation with him, and it seemed to be a good fit at the time, and I wanted to move, and that was it. I just, but it was being open. Part of the story, it's not the fact that it happened or how it happened. It was being open to the possibility.
Right.
And I truly believe in manifesting what you want and opening your eyes to the things that you want and really just being present in the life that's right in front of you. like thinking about that thing you want, but being present and open to possibilities in the moment. Because
Yeah.
if I had not gone on stage, if I didn't listen to the girls the night before, if I didn't say anything about what I wanted,
Mhm.
then I don't think any of this would have happened. So out of my story, that's what I want people to hear. Just be
Yeah.
open.
And yeah, I mean I love that sort of piece of it because you have to, I mean, your story points to the power of being around people that are, kind of in that same mindset of growth and wanting
True.
to, just think bigger than they already have. But also you have to be open to it. Like you have to be
Yeah.
willing to recognize and take risks and sort of do these things that are really kind of the only way to achieve big things. And so you're is this a summit exclusive to GoBundance, or is this
Um,
like, I mean, I feel like people might be inspired by your story and say, I like to know what conference that they should
yeah.
go to have things like this
I
happen.
think I think you can Google Austin, like as in Austin, Texas, Austin Entrepreneurial Summit Go Abundance. I know they're having another one. It's in May this year. I'm not sure. I'm not able to attend that one this year, but yeah, I think you can just Google it and find it
Okay.
that way. I think it's open to anybody, but I'm not sure. I don't want to
Okay.
speak. You have to go find out some more
Yeah.
about it. I'm a little detached at the moment from that whole. I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
Uh, that's fine. So you got on stage, you made your ask, you were introduced to this operator and decided you're going to move from South Carolina to Iowa. Is that what you said?
Yep.
Yeah, they're a little different. Um, well, I mean, how was it? Obviously, and I think your podcast, your book, you say small steps, big wins. I feel like this is a pretty big step. Um,
There were a lot of little steps to get me to that big step, to
yeah, I
be
suppose that's true.
honest.
They
There
adding
were
up.
yeah, they were all adding up. It started with getting a coach. It started with talking with Austin, and that started a year and a half prior. Oh, no, wait a minute. I take that back. Sorry. 2023, fall of 2023. So it started in August 2023. This was in May 2024, so less than a year. So there were a lot of steps in between. I was not a person who would take risks like that. I was not a person who would believe in themselves to be able to go out and do something completely unfamiliar.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of personal development that went on behind the scenes in order for me to accept a job like this, to end a chapter of my life that in South Carolina, to drive and get in the car and go 850 miles to a state I never visited, to move to an area I've never been in. It took me 3 months to figure out what state I'm in, because there's Iowa, Illinois, and uh, yeah, what's the other one? Something else. There's a couple of I states out here. I
Not,
can't even
yeah, it's not
remember.
a part of the country that I know well. So yeah, I mean,
You know, so
it's
yeah,
it's a big move.
it was.
It's a big move. It's also a position that you had not been in before from a job standpoint. So what did you what was that like? How did that kind of transition go for you? I
It
imagine you
was,
moved and had to start working fairly quickly
yeah.
after getting there. So,
Yeah, I
not
did,
not a
I
lot of
did.
time to acclimate
Yeah, I
to
did. It was
Iowa.
literally, yeah, it was literally a week. I left South Carolina May 28th, I think. I arrived in Iowa. Well, I went to Pennsylvania first, which is where I'm originally from. I visited my kids for a couple of days, got some of my stuff out of storage, and then drove over to Iowa. I think I got to Iowa June 4th or 5th, and then
Mhm.
started working on the 11th. So I basically hit the ground running. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And I'm so grateful I did.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about people. I learned a lot about running a business because over the 5 months, 6 months I was there, I became the gatekeeper and I learned just about every job within the business. So I'm no expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I've done a lot within that business. I made a lot of mistakes too. Did a lot of really stupid things that I'm like, why did I do that? But I did it anyway. But I came out on the other end stronger. I was released from that job a couple months ago, and it's fine. I mean, it was understandable because I wasn't fully qualified to walk into the position, and I didn't realize the complexity and maybe I don't want to say severity, it's the wrong word, but the business required more triage than my experience could play into.
Yeah.
So they had to hire somebody who had done that type of triage and turning a business around before, and that was not me. And so I understood that. So it wasn't, it wasn't like, oh, woe is me. I came all the way out here and I failed. I didn't fail per se. It was a fantastic learning experience. And now I feel very, uh, the word I like to use is anti fragile to be
Mhm.
able to walk into more difficult circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think yeah, it's not every person and position will fit together, but that doesn't necessarily mean good or bad, right? It's,
Right.
you're someone who's a good partner with one person might not be with another person, and vice versa. It
Right.
just doesn't. It's
Yeah.
just about fit. And so if it wasn't a good fit, then it wasn't a good fit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Um,
and the funny thing is, it appeared to be a good fit in the beginning, and then it
right,
wound up not being. And there's nobody's fault. Like,
right,
I don't want to point any fingers at all. Like I said, there were things that I did that I'm like, oh, I would definitely do that differently the next time, and that's where the learning comes in.
right,
I don't look at it as a failure. I don't view failure anymore like failure. I used to. I have a type A personality. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I tell everybody, it's like I want it done correctly the first time. And if I don't do it correctly, then I'm very hard on myself. But I have learned through the coaching, through the experiences that that failure is a good thing, and it's just an opportunity to learn to become a better version of yourself the next time.
hmm,
It's not really
yeah,
a failure.
absolutely,
It's not a failure, especially if you look at something and you say, okay, what can I learn from this? What can I walk away with? What can I do differently the next time? It's not a failure. And that life is an iteration of spirals. I love Ray Dalio's perspective on in his principal book about this idea of growth. It's an upward spiral, and you'll have those setbacks that bring you down, but then you'll circle back around and you'll become a better version of yourself, higher, higher, higher each time.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's not about getting it right and getting it perfect all the time and not having the mistakes. It's about taking the mistakes and using them to propel you higher than you were before.
yeah. Probably we need to change that. Failure gets placed on everything, right? Everything.
Everything. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
word failure gets assigned to anything that does not have, sort of 100% outcome, and it's
Yeah.
or 100% positive outcome, and realistically, that's not probably an accurate definition even, and we need to look at it as um, looking at things like this as learning lessons. And so
Right.
you take a chance, you take a shot, you take a risk. It works
Yeah.
or it doesn't work, and
Yeah.
what you
It's
can
just a
do is
matter.
find
Yeah, it's just a matter of rephrasing. It just
right.
reframing and rephrasing how you look at a situation. One of the phrases that Austin had said to me very early on in our coaching, and it sounds novel now to me, but it was so not novel now, it sounds familiar to me now, but it was novel back then.
Mhm.
He asked me, he's like, Sue, do you think things happen for you or to you? And
Yeah,
at that time, nobody had ever asked me that question. And I thought for a moment, I'm like, well, if I say things happen to me, then I play a victim in my own life, and I didn't want to be a victim in my life. If I say things happen for me, then everything happens for a reason, and I'm not even going to put good or bad to it. Those things happen to mold me and shape me to become a better version of myself. It's how I look at it. It's my perception of what's happening in front of me.
Yeah.
So how we see that thing determines what we do with it, and if we take it as a learning experience or not.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So, I mean, with that in mind, you're no longer director of operations at the HVAC company, but
Correct.
I know you've been focusing on the podcast. I mean, I know, I think before we even started recording, we sort of trying to find the next thing, or what is your, I don't know, heart, mind, however you want to look at it. What are you leaning towards, or you just going to take some time? What's kind of next for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, because when I'm asked it, my answer actually changes depending on what week it is. And the reason that is, and I had been thinking about this, because the name of your podcast is Know Your Why. And I was thinking to myself, well, I'm coming on a podcast. Do I really know coming on your podcast? Do I really know my why right now? And I am in this season where I'm trying to define my why.
Yeah.
Why am I here? Why do I do what I do? Yes, I have a podcast, and I'm leaning into why I have my podcast and what its purpose is. And I know what the purpose is, but I'm asking myself a deeper question: is there a deeper meaning? Is there a deeper drive behind my podcast? Why I do what I do? I haven't quite answered that yet. And then a friend of mine reminded me that the last 6 months that I was doing this director of operations job was beyond stressful. She said to me, quote, her words were, quote, "You went through hell," end quote. So she said, give yourself a little grace to go through some healing and to really just rest. And I'm very grateful. I live in a state of gratefulness and gratitude, in that I don't have to work like right this second.
Yeah.
So I can take that pause in my life to breathe, to figure out what my next iteration is. So the process of finding a why am I here? Why am I doing this? It has been a process, and it
Mhm.
continues to be a process. Like I said before, I believe you're always one conversation away from changing your life. So through my podcast, I get an opportunity to talk to a number of amazing people. And what's been very interesting the last couple of weeks is that I've had conversations with people that bring me closer and closer to what my why is, to flush out my talents, to flush out my superpowers, to be able to really see what I can hone in into. Because when you look at my resume, if you put that and you look at, math teacher, financial advisor, director of operations, it's like, whoa, where's
Okay.
your, like, that's a very interesting skill set, So, um, that's where I'm headed. So I'm sorry. I think I veered from the question. I'm not sure if I.
No, that's fine. I mean, there's no wrong answers.
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, it's interesting. I, I've realized it in myself, I guess, but I also, just having this podcast where I always ask people, what is your why? I think, um, the probably people, either know they're coming on a podcast that's called this, they know they're going to be asked the question or whatever, but people tend to have an answer. But I do think for sure it evolves. And so, what your why was when you're 20 versus what your why was when you're 40 versus when you're 60, when you're 80, like all of those things, like through life, it's going to change. Like, right,
Mhm.
my why, and I never called it this or knew this, but it's like my why when I was young was to not be poor, probably, like realistically, like it was just I didn't want to be poor anymore. Like, how do I figure out how to not do that? And then, now it's very much my family. At some point my kids will grow and be gone, and they'll still be important to me, but like there may be another evolution of whatever that is for me. And so I think what you're describing is you're in between whys. Like you're in
Yeah.
that, transition zone, that evolution zone, which is it never like we never really gets talked about, but like I know that it's true. I know that it happens because, we talk like I looked because we were talking about this before we started recording, but it's like very close to 400 episodes, and so ask this question of enough people to see it. It changes. It just changes.
Mhm.
It depends on where we are in life. It depends on what what's happening around us, what we need, what the people around us need, like all of that. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
those changing whys aren't just like flipping light switches.
Yeah.
It's not just going to be I'm
It's a
here's my why,
process.
and I
Yeah.
now it's this
Now
one,
I
and I
know where
snap
it
a
is,
finger.
and now I'm going off in that
Yeah,
direction. Yeah. I mean, for me, this why, you know what it's teaching me? That I don't have a definitive I do have an idea what my why is. The bigger picture of the why, it's executing the why. It's figuring out how to put the why into motion. But the bigger lesson that I've learned is to learn that it's okay to sit in the unknown. It's
yeah,
okay to be uncomfortable for a little bit while you're trying to figure things out, to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. That's what I've been learning in this season because I get a little frustrated. Like I said, I have a type A personality. I love to do, 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 do. I'm always on the go. And if I'm not doing something, I don't feel productive. If I'm
yeah,
not working, I'm not doing it. So I think we talked about right before you hit record, I'm in this season of recording podcasts where it's like I'm on hyper mode. I'm doing a bunch of podcasts, because I feel like I'm doing something, I'm moving forward.
yeah,
My biggest why is I love to help people. I love to see people win. That's why I feel I'm on this earth. I want to encourage people. I want to connect people. I feel very natural. I'm energized when I connect people. I'm energized when I help people solve problems. It's a great motivator for a why. Like it's a why, but the season I'm in is translating that into what does that look like practically?
yeah,
So I
yeah,
kind of know what my why is, like why I'm here. This is what I'm here to do. It's now, how do I do it?
yeah. And I think that's a valuable and important distinction. The why the why isn't typically the why isn't the operating system. The why is the engine that keeps it going, right? So it's
Yeah.
like that's not they're not the same. And so yeah, if your motivation is helping people, that's half the question, right? Or that's half the piece of the puzzle. You have to now figure out how that looks for you, how
Hmm.
that ultimately plays out. And so I think yeah, it's there is a distinction there that it's funny because a lot of times people start with the execution, like you said, like type A personality. I just need to be doing something. I need to be working. I need to be that. But you probably can work more effectively by figuring out the why, the what you want to do with that work, and then applying it because you'll be passionate about it. You'll be
Yeah.
energized by it instead of just kind of just having a job per se. So it's
Right.
I mean I'm in in a sense sort of glad that you you didn't just have an answer for that, because I think this is actually like an important piece of the piece of the conversation, of things that people, like you said, being uncomfortable or being comfortable being uncomfortable, and recognizing that's okay, that maybe you don't know exactly what your purpose is at that moment. Like, okay,
Hmm.
just that's fine. Just be thinking about it, right? Like that's the best thing we could do. Be thinking about it. Don't be afraid to take risks. As you mentioned, you're one conversation away from changing your life. Like, just look at ways to, I guess, find what's something you're passionate about it and give it a try. And maybe it
Mm.
does, maybe it's not it. Maybe it's, 6 months later you're trying something else, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't, you
Right.
don't have to. I always, you know, ironically, as someone who went to school for a long time for something very, very specific, I think that it's a silly exercise to tell high school students that they should know what they want to be for the rest of their life.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
these are 16 to 18-year-old kids. Like, you don't know what life holds for the rest of
Mhm.
the time. Like, what your next 60 years is going to be. Like, that's an insane thing to think that that has to be known at
Yeah.
that
I
age. And it's just kind of an odd, again, I was in that space. I did it. I thought I knew what I wanted to do for the
Yeah.
rest
Well,
of my
me
life.
too. I mean, when you go to become a teacher, that's just it. Just like you're a teacher, 35 years. That's it. That's what your
Right.
profession's going to be. There's nothing that's a change. I think, a mild mission for a lot of people who embrace this idea of change is that we should shatter the fallacy that you will have the same job slash profession your entire life.
Yeah,
Because if
that's
you
not the
look
norm
at
anymore.
life on a time continuum, if you look at, say you're going to live for 90 years and you look at what you do in that 90-year period, you're not going to be a teacher for 90 years. The first 18, you were a child. You went through adolescence.
Yeah.
You went to school. You hit 18 years old. I mean, that's already right there. There's 18 years. And then you go 18 to whatever. It changes as you go. And this was one of the ideas or beliefs that I had to let go of. And I really came to the realization recently in that now that I'm in between, I'm looking for the next why or the next job. I'm not sure if I'm going to go the entrepreneurial route or if I'm going to take a traditional W-2, either or. I'm open to whatever the possibilities are,
Yeah.
but I had to let go of the belief that this is going to be my job for the next 10 years of my life.
Right.
Once I let go of that, I'm like, "Oh, okay." I could walk into a situation where it's perfect, and that's what I do for the next 10 years. I'm not discounting that. I'm just saying being open to the possibility that that's not it doesn't have to be that. And it releases me from looking for the perfect job. It
Right.
releases me from perfectionism, from it releases me from that pressure of, oh, is this the right job? Is this going to be the right one? What if it's not the right one? Well, it's okay if it's not the right one.
Yeah.
If it works out for 6 months, then you're 6 months more ahead. You have 6 months of experience more. It was a learning experience, whatever you walk away with it from. But it's not number one, it's not a failure. And number two, it's okay.
Yeah.
How many times do we tell these stories to ourselves that we have this idea? We tell ourselves this story, this self imposed deadline, or this self imposed due date, or this self imposed belief system that really is nobody else's, but something that we made up in our mind.
Hmm. Yeah. It's true.
And when we realize that it's our pressure on ourselves that we don't have to impose how
Yeah.
freeing it becomes. Like for my own stuff right now, you have to get a job. Well, yeah, eventually I do, yes, but I'm in a position I don't need one right now. you know or I was having a conversation with a girlfriend this morning and she was like, well, yeah, but I have to do this. I'm like, who's telling you you have to do this thing?
Right.
She's like, nobody. I said, okay, so you are putting that deadline, that thing that you have to do on yourself to create this stress that you have that you don't need to have, because that thing that you're imposing isn't coming from anybody else but you.
Right.
I'm like, just
Right.
release it, let
Yeah.
it go, and then allow life to be. One of my favorite books ever is The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. I tell everybody, if they one book to recommend, that's the one.
Hmm.
And that book
Okay.
changed my life, changed my perspective. because when you allow life to happen to you and lean into the opportunities that are presented in front of you, then it opens up a whole new world you may not ever have had happen. And Michael Singer walks through his own experience in that book, that by the time I couldn't put the book down. By the time I got to the end, I was like, wow, I'm going to stop trying to manipulate life and allow life to unfold before me. That doesn't mean I don't do things. It just means I stopped trying to live life where I was forcing things to happen the way I wanted them to happen.
Yeah. Yep.
So
No,
there's a difference.
it makes total sense. I'll have to check that book out. I think, just it's interesting because there's a lot of things that are. I was thinking about this kind of as you were speaking about it, but like there's a lot of things that are broken up into chunks, right? So we go to, if you go to college, it's typically a 2 or a 4 year. If you go to med school, it's 4 more years. Everything's like seemingly in 2 to 4 year chunks. If you join the military, I think typically, you're signing up for 4 years, right? Now, some people stay there and they go, 20 plus years and retire and have a pension. All the same thing, like police department, fire departments, there are certain things where you get something. There's an incentive for staying within that job for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that they are broken up into 4 year chunks or whatever, that is probably actually a pretty good indicator that maybe that's how we should think about things, like maybe in 2 to 5 year chunks, not in the rest of your life. Right. Like it's because it, like, think about, like, if they were like, okay, if you go to college, you're in college for the next 40 years, nobody's going to college. Literally nobody's going to do. If they say, oh, you're going to be, you join the military, you have to be in the military for 40 years. Like nobody's going to do that. So maybe that's how we should look at any of these like career type decisions, and maybe it ends up being a 40-year career and great. Maybe
I mean,
it
if you can
shifts how it
find
looks.
something.
Like,
Yeah. I mean, I think again, it goes back to those self-imposed beliefs. I take this job. Oh, I'm going to be at this job for 35 years. Well, if that's your belief system, then that's what you're believing. I mean, I know teachers who have taught for 35 years. That's all they know. And then when they come out, they don't know what to do with themselves, some of them, because that's all you know. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying bring it to your awareness that if you've been doing something the same for a long time, know that you have the power and capacity within you to take your skill set, to take what you've done, to take that job and be able to translate it into something else that you don't just have to stop doing. Find that component that you love about what you did and bring it out into the world. Figure a way to take what you love and pass it on to others. I don't, this idea of retirement, people might disagree with me on this. I don't believe in retirement. I just believe in iterating into another version of yourself that's just, productive in a different way, to design your life the way you want it. Retirement to me is very foreign. I don't see it. I just say, okay, I know where I want to be in 10 years. I'm 53 now, so 10 years will make me 63. It's like I have an idea where I want to be, but am I going to stop and not work? No. I mean, like my entire life I've always done my entire life. Now I'm designing the life to do what I love to do and just keep doing it. And I won't stop until I die. I'm just going to keep doing what I love to do.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Well, Sue, when people hear this and they want to reach out to you, try and create some of those conversations, the life-changing conversations, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Well, I would love if anybody would reach out. I love to have a conversation. If anyone wants to come on my podcast, that's another thing too. I do have a website, www.suesaller.com, SUESALLER.com. You can find me that way. You can email me, sue@suesaller.com. And those are pretty much the two. I am on LinkedIn. I have stuff on social media. I'm on Instagram at the Sue Saller, but I do some stuff on there. But I've had people reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll get back to them that way. So those are the main ones.
Okay, love it, and we'll get all that in the show notes so people can
Thank you.
connect. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for all that you shared today. I think there's really a lot of good lessons in there that people can take into their own life, and just what we talked about with realizing it doesn't have to be a certain way. Those are generally self-imposed limitations. So thank you, Sue, for the time.
Yeah, thank you, Jason, for having me. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. Folks listening, I know you're going to love this. Make sure you connect with Sue, and please like, rate, and review the show so we can continue to get more great guests. As always, thank you all for listening.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?